Yeah, first I want to invite everybody for this webinar. We have over 100 people registered and from 40 different countries, from all the different continents. So that shows, how popular Kristy is. So she has written a good book and she has been, very talented researcher, anthropologist, and a lot of credentials. She has written the book on cocoa, and now she's doing a lot of work in Ghana to help the cocoa farmers and chocolate makers with her institute called Cocoa, Entrepreneur Cocoapreneurship Institute of Ghana, CIG. Suddenly I got into Creek. I'm sorry. Okay. CIG. Okay. So she's going to share her thoughts on how we can innovate along the cocoa value chain. So that helps everybody. So first I want to welcome you all, and also just a couple of housekeeping rules before I turn over. You can put all your questions on the chat, and Teresa and I will be moderating it. And once she presents the presentation, then we will go for the question and answer. And also today, Leissle will be joining, and he will be talking about the fermentation and what he is doing. So Kristy and Leissle will be doing this webinar, and people have joined from different time zones, so it's a good day for all of you. Thank you for joining, and please put it on mute, and then put your camera on, don't show the way camera. And then I just want to start this with a small brief introduction to CocoaTown. So I'm going to share the screen for 5 minutes. Yeah, CocoaTown, where we have a parent company called Inno Concepts that we founded in 1992. From the beginning, we always wanted to do something that's unique and innovative. So we did not want to sell Me Too products. So we started selling innovative specialty food processing machines for the Indian cooking. Now, even the Indian cooking, it was very specific to our region. It's a South Indian cooking. And over the years, when I talk to the customers, when they buy it, I ask them, what do you use it for? Especially when I see a name that's not I'm familiar with, because it was such a niche market. Then over the years, I collected all the information, what people are using it for. Then when in 2007, when the recession came in USA, we had a tough time. We had a warehouse full of machines and not sold, and we were thinking what to do. Then we went through our notes and saw what people were using these machines for. And then the one thing that caught our interest was chocolate industry, because people said they had to modify the machines and they had to do, the grind the cocoa nibs for 2 to 3 days. And they had to be engineers, not just chocolate makers alone. Unless they are engineers, they couldn't modify the machine to work for them. So then we said, okay, we should focus on that industry where we can have um, the ability to make a positive social impact. So because we also learned about cocoa trading, where it's traded as a commodity and farmers could not sell it for a higher price and things like that. That's when we said, okay, we will focus on developing the machines for the chocolate industry, so the chocolate makers can, focus their energy on their trade, which is making chocolate. So we were the pioneers in the industry. So we started with the Melanger because that's the one we had first. And then over the years, we have done a lot more machines. Now we have the complete line of machines in 4 different lines, like depending on your budget and amount you want to process, or your hobbyist, or your business making from home, or your small scale, medium scale business, we have the machines. And then our objective is in 2009, when we started CocoaTown, was to facilitate the evolution of cocoa as a superfood and enable chocopreneurs with the machines at affordable prices, and then help make chocolate makers make the good chocolate instead of the junk food. And then also that way, where they help the farmers to develop flavor beans, and then they got more money for their things. So it was, in a way, trying to make farming sustainable. And then this is a small, infographic of our company over the years. So we have patents for our machines. We don't copy our machines. We study the industry, and our customers are helping us. With the customers' input, we, develop machines that are specific for the chocolate industry. And then in 2020, again, we had to pivot with the COVID-19. Now we understand, people cannot travel, like Kristy was saying. Everybody is stuck at their home or office, and then we wanted to bring the education to them. So we are focusing on the educating the chocopreneurs, and we started this Empowering Chocopreneurs series of webinar, and we highlight a lot of different topics. And today we are happy to introduce Kristy, because we want to make sure we can create, we want to be known as not just a company that sells machines, but helping the chocopreneurs throughout their journey with the education, equipment, and tools for evaluating their beans or the chocolate, anything that you need. So what is the future? So hopefully we can return soon, since now the vaccine is available, so we can meet friends and family face to face. But we want to continue the virtual connections, because even though in person, maybe I can see 5 people, but now virtually we can see people from 40 different countries from my living room. So that's, always, they say there's a silver lining in any black cloud. That's what I'm looking at it. Yes, it was tough, but I think a lot of things have changed. So, and then I want to conclude this with the thing that we believe as a person, as a company, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. That means all the beings everywhere in the universe be happy and free, and may my thoughts, words, and actions of my own life contribute in some way to their happiness and to that freedom for all. Thank you. Now I turn over the mic to Kristy.
Thank you so much, 𝗪𝗏𝗀, for that fantastic introduction and a very kind introduction. And also just thank you to you and to 𝗏𝗏 for inviting me to give this webinar. I know we've been talking about it for a couple of months now, and I've been so much looking forward to it. It is a really dynamic moment in cocoa and chocolate in West Africa right now, and to be able to speak to that from some of my own experiences and some of our experiences together is really fantastic. And I also I want to thank Teresa for getting all of our tech set up and making everything work very beautifully. So thank you for that. And just to also recognize that CocoaTown has already had an impact here in West Africa when it comes to innovation. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that as we go through the presentation. A couple more thanks before we begin. Leissle Agyare will be joining me a little bit later in this webinar to talk about some fermentation innovations that are happening in the Eastern region. And so I want to thank him for taking the time to be here, and I'll give him a proper introduction later. And also just to say, I've been scrolling through the participant list, and it's so nice to see familiar names, and really thank you so much, all of you, for dialing in from everywhere you are in the world. I think, it's very challenging sometimes to make times work across different time zones on a weekend, and we've got people from the US to the Philippines, to here in West Africa. So really grateful that you've all chosen to spend your time with us today. So I'm going to share my screen and get started on our Spaces for Innovation webinar. Let me just play it. So our topic today, as advertised so beautifully by Teresa, is Spaces for Innovation. And like I said, we're in a dynamic moment in West Africa right now when it comes to cocoa and chocolate. And we have a lot of challenges, as always, but also tremendous opportunities, some new opportunities, some opportunities that have always existed and are now being exploited and turned into profitable ventures. So this is what we'll be addressing, and I'm going to put it into some context for us and briefly on West Africa's role in the chocolate industry. And what I'd like to do is Spaces for Innovation is a very big topic, so I'm going to give you as much as I can, but spend more time on certain innovative spaces than others. But we will have plenty of time for question and answer. And so if I'm breezing through some of these spaces and challenges and opportunities, just know that we can always address them in the Q&A. So a little bit just about me before I begin. You can always find me at Doc of Chalk. You can go to my website, docofchalk.com, and you will find links to all of my publications that are available online. You'll find links to all of the media appearances I've done that are available online. And I am planning in the next week or two maximum to launch a new blog. And the topic of the blog series, which I'll be running for the next, I would say 6 to 12 months, is going to be why I eat pretty much any chocolate. I know that is not a particularly fashionable position to have, but I have some learnings and experiences over my many years of working and researching in the chocolate industry that have led me to eat kind of anything. So I'll be exploring the reasons behind that on a new blog that I'm just about to launch soon. If you go to the website and linger there for about 15 seconds, a little pop-up will come up and ask you if you want to subscribe to the newsletter, and the newsletter will announce to you when new blog posts appear. And you can always find me on Twitter and Instagram at Doc of Chalk. So my primary work is researching and writing about cocoa and chocolate, and I've been doing this for coming up on, I think it's 18 years now. So this is the main focus of my work. Some of you may be familiar with my book, which came out in 2018 called Cocoa, which addressed the geopolitics of the cocoa industry and other politics as well. I tend to do a lot of work on politics and economics, but also I do work on the cultures of cocoa and chocolate, primarily in West Africa, although I've researched across sub-Saharan Africa and in other parts of the cocoa growing world as well. So I research for my own writing, my own books and articles, but I also occasionally take on contracts to do research projects for organizations and companies when that's necessary. Recently, this is an image from some recent work that I did in the second half of last year on cocoa tenant labor rights. And I did that in partnership with Divine Chocolate and 𝗀𝗄𝗃 Cocoa, who supplied Divine with cocoa here in Ghana, fair trade certified cocoa. And so we did a pretty deep dive into tenant farmers and caretakers who don't get too much attention in the cocoa industry, but we are going to rectify that. And we've planned a webinar quite soon for sharing the results of that research. So you can keep an eye out for that on my social media feeds and my blog. I'll be announcing when that happens. And if you happen to be in here in Ghana, we'll be hosting an in-person event in Kumasi to share the results of that research once we have a little bit of travel restrictions eased. We went into a little bit tighter restriction phase a week or so ago. So we're gonna wait until that finishes before we do a live event. I also consult as asked for NGOs when this is a training I did, a recent training I did for Oxfam Ghana on the cocoa supply chain. We have, Oxfam has done a lot of work on cocoa through quite a bit through the Behind the Brands initiative, which is an Oxfam Global initiative, and they're really delving into cocoa here in Ghana. And so this is an example of the kind of a training that I might do. This was from late last year, and you can see the supply chain. I've started to draw it on the wall in the photo behind me, but obviously we ended up filling up all of those 9 or 12 squares of paper, whatever it was, because the cocoa supply chain is extremely complex and a lot of spaces for innovation there. Finally, I am co-founder with 𝗪𝗫𝗪𝗃 of the Cocoapreneurship Institute of Ghana, which Andal mentioned. And I will be talking more about CIG in a few moments, but we support entrepreneurs working at any stage of the value chain in cocoa across West Africa. And we have supported innovations in cocoa. We have done some of our own innovations, and so I'll be addressing that as well. So basically through all of these things, my own research and writing, my NGO that I co-founded with 𝗪𝗫𝗪𝗃, and consultancy and training works that I've done, I've had quite a bit of experience in West Africa across the supply chain, and been in the very privileged position to be able to observe a lot of the innovations that are happening, to support those where I can, and to notice the spaces where we still need, where there's still a lot of space for innovation to happen. So it's really a privilege to be able to share this with you. I know that at times it's quite difficult to come to West Africa and see things with your very own eyes. And so it's an honor to be able to share what I have seen with you today. So I'll just briefly, we can't really understand about innovations here, I think, until we just talk for a moment about Africa and chocolate. So I think, we all know that cocoa originated in this part of the world, in the Mesoamerican region, and its longest history is there. So of course it's important for us to pay attention to those ancient cocoa innovators. But really today, most of the cocoa grown in the world comes from West Africa. And so when we're talking about spaces for innovation, West Africa really is the place where there's a lot of work that can be done, and a lot of work that we have yet to imagine. And so I think it's really exciting to be able to focus on West Africa in this talk, because so much cocoa does come from here. And to just illustrate this, this is a graph I use a lot. It's in my book, Cocoa. And this is Africa's share really of cocoa production. It's about almost 3/4. And most of that really is in West Africa. And so you can see even the ancient home of cocoa in the Americas produces very little today. But if we look more closely at that graph, break it down, these numbers are probably from a couple of seasons ago. There's a lag between when the season concludes and when we get the updated statistics about it. But this is generally the pattern that we've seen over the past number of years, where Ivory Coast has the lion's share of cocoa production. Ghana has about half of Ivory Coast production. And together, the two of them are really the giants. More than 50%, more than half of cocoa grown in the world comes from just these two countries. I don't know if I've mentioned that I live in Ghana. I'll show you a map in a moment and talk a little bit more about that. But so this part of the world really is where our cocoa is coming from. And if you add in Nigeria and Cameroon, which are also nearby, then these are the cocoa giants. So lots of spaces for innovation here. So here's Ghana, and I want to just spend a moment on this map, because it's very interesting geographically what we can say about innovation in the cocoa part of things, in the farming part of this industry, on the ground where the cocoa is growing, and even before it's evacuated and moved to port, what the kind of geography of innovation looks like. And so I live here in Accra, the capital. I used to live up here in Kumasi, which is a little bit more in the heart of cocoa growing country, a long time ago. And the reason I lived in Kumasi is because most of the cocoa grown in Ghana grows here in the Western region. And that's why I put a thick arrow there. So this is where the cocoa is mostly coming from these days, and has been for quite some time. There is also a great deal of cocoa coming from Brong-Ahafo region and Ashanti. And in fact, I'll just point out that when I was doing the labor rights study with Divine and 𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, we were here over in the Western region, in part because that is the dominant cocoa growing area of Ghana. And so lots of cocoa in this part of the country. It doesn't grow up here because it's too dry and arid. The Sahara Desert's not so far away. But then we also have quite a bit of cocoa coming from Central region and Eastern. Now, these arrows are smaller because there is not as much cocoa coming from this part of the country, maybe a little bit more from Central. It's still mostly coming from here. But what I'd like to point out is that a lot of the innovations in cocoa that I've observed on the farm side have really come from Eastern region. Now, I think there's a few reasons for that, probably all of them overlapping. So Eastern is the oldest cocoa growing area of Ghana. It was where cocoa was first grown in this country. And the cocoa spread from here across Ghana. But this can be quite old wealth, old family farmlands, a lot of history, a lot of knowledge, a lot of skill. And I think proximity to Accra, the capital, where a lot of people may like to live or do business, and you can get much more easily from Accra to farms in the eastern region. As well as NGOs being headquartered here, companies being headquartered here. We've got the big port at Tema. We have 2 ports in Ghana, Tema and Takoradi. There's just a lot of activity going on here. And I think that is potentially a driver of some of the innovations that we've seen. As you may know, West Africa is not a big source of organic cocoa. Mainly that's Dominican Republic, places in South America. All of the organic cocoa in Ghana is from Eastern region. So we do have it, we don't have a lot, but all of it is here. So you won't find organic certified cocoa farms in this part of the country. And if they do exist, I haven't heard of them, but primarily we're looking at Eastern region. So even geographically, I think in West Africa, there are spaces where innovations may be more likely to happen than others. And then we may see that some places which are more remote may have not those same innovations or different innovations, but geographically it's very interesting. Just to illustrate a little bit of the remoteness of here, when I did the labor rights study, I chose to fly to Kumasi. The road, this line here, the road from Accra to Kumasi is very dangerous from a car accident point of view. So I chose to fly there. And then it was about a 6-hour journey from Kumasi to the place, almost to the border where we worked. And that was in my own private vehicle. If we were, taking chochos or other local transport, which I've done many times, it would have been a lot longer journey. So some of the places here that are growing so much cocoa are just hard to access. So we can think too about where innovations can even happen when it comes to West African cocoa geographies. So I want to spend a few minutes on price innovations. We have seen some changes in price recently, and I think it's worth spending a little bit of time talking about what those innovations were. But I want to just start with this chart, which is a chart of the cocoa world market price. I took the average from the monthly averages from the ICCO website on their statistics page. And I created this chart, and it goes from September 2015, 5 years, through September 2020, because this was a very interesting period, as you can see, for cocoa's price. Up and down a lot of volatility. If, like Ghana, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Cameroon, you depend on cocoa, this isn't an ideal scenario because you can't really plan your national budget very easily. And I think that there's some driving factors in this price volatility that are completely outside anybody's control. And so let's just take this kind of big slide here and talk about what some of those drivers are. And then I'll get to the innovation that's been put in place to address some of these issues. So before I say that, I'll just add that Ghana sets the producer price. So they take this world market price, and we don't really know how much Ghana gets from their contracts. There's not a lot of transparency around that, but they take something roughly world market price and designate a percentage of that gets paid directly to the farmer. That's called the producer price. And the producer price in Ghana is fixed for the season. And so they announce it at the start of the season around September, October, and it stays fixed, and everybody does receive that price. If we minus out the weighing corruption and things like that inevitably happen, then we can say confidently that, farmers do receive the producer price as it's fixed by the government in Ghana. So here, if we look at this part, we see like this was a pretty high price for a while. Here, leading up to this moment was an El Nino cycle, which is a dry, hot cycle, and there was drought, which meant that there was not as much supply of cocoa because West Africa was in a drought period. Not as much supply, of course, means the price stays relatively high. Then the El Nino cycle ended, and we see the weather improve, and then supply increase, and this massive price drop as a result. So this change is really a supply, for me, in my analysis, a supply-driven change in the price downward because of the weather shifting and becoming more favorable for cocoa in West Africa. But now if you're Ghana Cocoa Board and you set, let's for September. So here, say this is September. This is when the price would be set at the start of the season. You've taken all of this price data to set your producer price. And then you've announced it. And now they don't have a crystal ball. I mean, we kind of know when the El Nino cycles are going to come and go, but not exactly. And then suddenly you're faced with this tremendous price drop. And all right, it's fair to say that the Ghana Cocoa Board forward sells its cocoa. So probably all of the cocoa that they were going to plan to sell for this season was already sold. But that doesn't mean it's any less difficult for them to decide, well, what do we do with the producer price? Now we're committed to paying a higher price when the world market price has fallen. Here, I think we are having a little bit more of a demand issue. This is, if we skip forward to January 2020, we can see this price starting to go back up, but then of course, COVID. And this, I think, is much more of a demand-driven price slide. Whether demand really fell or not, and by how much, I think still remains to be seen. But we know that there has been a lot of volatility and uncertainty in the trade itself. And so this, I think, is more of a demand side impact. Obviously, these are more complicated issues than I'm saying here. I'm just summarizing briefly so we can just look at why price innovation is necessary. Because once again, government might have started planning something here and then whoop, suddenly, there's this huge fall. So, how do you address this? How, as a government, do you even this out for yourself and start to introduce a little bit more constancy or security into this tremendously volatile situation? I will also just point out that Ghana has kept its producer price pretty level throughout this period. It has never fallen. They've never dropped the producer price. They've raised it, but not frequently or very high until this past season, because they introduced this tremendous price innovation, which is the living income differential. So we know the price of cocoa is low. We know that we need to pay more to the farmers for their labor. The living income differential was meant to address this, right? Meant to relieve farmers of poverty, as this headline suggests. But it's also a way to give the governments some planning space, a little bit of breathing room, so that they are perhaps not as subject to the world market price volatility. So this is an innovation that I think has been extremely important. It's really shaken the market up. They imposed a living income differential of $400 per metric ton of cocoa. The certification programs have long used a similar model where you pay a premium for organic certified or fair trade certified. This is not very different to that in kind. It's a similar model. The difference is it's all cocoa, right? It's any cocoa that comes from Ghana and Ivory Coast has now attached to it this living income differential of $400. The companies have been quite resistant to this in some ways. They have publicly agreed to pay, but maybe they're trying to do some things to not pay. So it's, that alone tells us that it's a big deal. But I think this has been a tremendous innovation on the part of Ghana and Ivory Coast. And what's been very cool about it to me is that if you see this headline, Akufo-Addo is the president of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo. He just won re-election in December last year for another term. And so, but before even he was re-elected, he announced an increase in the producer price for this season, 2021, to 660 cedis per bag. Now, if he were to have, what he would need to do to pass along that $400 per metric ton to farmers through the producer price, it would have needed to go up by only 21%, but he actually increased it by 28%. And obviously this wasn't a decision of the president alone. Ghana Cocoa Board obviously was heavily involved. So the point is that they increased the producer price by even more than the $400 per metric ton would have necessitated to pass that that LID along to farmers themselves. So, and again, people here do tend to get the producer price. So farmers are quite happy. They're still obviously earning little money compared to the work that they do, but this was a big increase. And so I think this particular innovation has had an impact already on the farm level. And we need to acknowledge that and see, keep a very close eye on what the long-term impacts of this particular innovation are going to be. So there's a bit on price, and I'm happy to talk more about that in the Q&A, but I'd like to spend the next segment just on domestic value addition. And I think here, really, obviously the living income differential is one way to pass, to keep some more value of cocoa here in Ghana. Value addition, changing the cocoa beans into something usable, obviously is the more historical way that the West African countries have done this. And so these are valuable, of course, cocoa beans, but it's more valuable to turn them into something. So West Africa, Ghana included, can do a lot of processing to semi-finished products. So we've got liquor, we've got cocoa butter, we've got powder. These have long been produced in this part of the world. And so this kind of domestic value addition has happened for a very long time, and it actually happens at quite a big scale. It's industrial scale. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Ghana has the capacity to process like between 30 and 40% of its crop or something. So not an insignificant amount. But if you look at this chart, if we remember Africa was producing, 3/4 of all of the cocoa beans in the world, it's only processing 19% of them. So a lot of space left for innovations in grinding of beans and processing beans, even to the intermediate products, right? And so this pretty much is intermediate products. This is not Africa processing cocoa into chocolate. This is butter, liquor, powder, right? And so I think a lot of space, a lot of road left to travel on the domestic processing front, and we will have to see where we go. But I want to just say that I don't want to name processing to intermediate products necessarily as an innovation. It's more like to set the stage for some other value addition innovations that we've seen. I want you to be aware that we do have domestic processing here. It does happen to the intermediate products, but it is large scale industrial. And now, one of the reasons why I hesitate to say this is a big innovation is because, number one, it doesn't create that many jobs. The jobs that it does create are skilled labor for sure. This is a picture of a factory in Takoradi over by the big port in the western part of the country. So it's creating some jobs, but not very many. And while they're skilled, they're not entrepreneurial, right? Like these guys that you see working here in the factory are not entrepreneurs. They're skilled laborers, they're skilled workers who've come in to do a factory job, but they're not inventing, maybe they do on their own time, but in the job, they're not. So the intermediate processing that happens here, even though it's on a large scale, I think it doesn't give us necessarily a lot of room for innovation just because that's the nature of the thing. However, what has been happening is a lot more small scale stuff. I don't remember why I put more pictures of butter, liquor, powder. I think probably to say that when we think about innovations, when we think about entrepreneurial, innovative ways to add value to cocoa, we're probably not thinking too much about butter, liquor, powder. What we're really thinking about is chocolate. And so what has been happening on that front has been extremely exciting. Now, again, it's not brand new. We've always had chocolate here in Ghana. This is the Golden Tree brand, which is produced by a company called CPC, Cocoa Processing Company, which is a government-run, partially government-run company based in Tema. And this is King's Bite milk chocolate. You can buy it anywhere. You can buy it in the traffic. I just saw a vendor when I was driving home from the grocery store before selling King's Bite. You can get different varieties, dark milk, coffee. There's a lemon flavor bar, the 𝗪𝗏𝗏 bar. There's orange. There's everything, right? And so we've always had this, right? And it's a government sort of supported chocolate. It's widely available throughout Ghana, even in the rural regions sometimes, certainly in the bush towns. But that was all we had for a long time. And so that was kind of the limit of domestic value addition to chocolate until I would say the last 5 to 7 years. And then we have had an explosion of bean to bar, liquor to bar, artisan chocolate makers, confectioners, people doing all different kinds of things. And so just to illustrate some of the innovations that have happened in value addition, I want to just take you through on a 2-minute journey through some of our local artisans here. And so you can see, and this is, I can't even show you all of them, right? We have a new one literally every day. So this is Choco Love, which is very nice because you can actually buy it at the airport. They have a whole dedicated shop at Kotoka International Airport, which we never had before. People leaving the country want to buy some chocolate from Ghana. Now they can, right? At Choco Love shop. You can see they've adopted a quite prideful packaging for this particular bar. This is the Ghana flag, the red, yellow, and green stripe with the black star, some cool shapes. This is DecoCraft. I'm sure they just changed their name to something else, but Greetings from Ghana was another really nice brand. I used to use this in my tastings that I ran here all the time. You can see quite African-inspired, West African-inspired, Adinkra kind of fabric-y inspiration on the packaging, obviously cocoa pods, really nice, locally made artisanal chocolate. Maison Kwame, beautiful, beautiful chocolates with some lovely flavor inclusions. This Maison Kwame's packaging has also changed since this, but this company makes, again, a bean to bar artisan, makes chocolate, makes inclusion chocolate, makes confectionery goods. The chocolate goes into pastries and cookies and things like that, and also bonbons. Absolutely stunning work, really, really nice. 𝗫𝗄𝗃 treats, beautiful bean to bar chocolate. And I have to just show you because when I just was doing my shopping this morning, I just saw my favorite 𝗫𝗄𝗃 bar, which is ɡari and peanut butter bar, milk chocolate. Ɡari is like cassava that's been fermented and ground into like a powder almost, kind of like almost like a grits consistency, but it's very popular with students, especially to make into a porridge, and you add sugar and stuff, and it's like a nice kind of breakfast. So this, like after this webinar finishes, I will probably eat this entire thing. So we've got 𝗫𝗄𝗃 treats. We've got 57 chocolate. Some of you may be familiar with 57. Beautiful, beautiful Ghana landmark inspired packaging that shows different images from around Ghana or scenes from around Ghana. Lovely inclusions. This one is hibiscus, quite tart, interesting inclusion. Now they do a moringa infused bar, which is like so gorgeous. So we have a lot of innovation, bean to bar, liquor to bar, artisanal chocolate, right? And that is all happening now. Is there space for innovation? Absolutely, yes. And CocoaTown indeed is even contributing to that. But do we, have we had innovation up until now? 100%. And that's really all happened in the last few years. We do have a new a private large-scale industrial chocolate maker called Niche Chocolate. And because they're large scale, they obviously get to distribute a little bit more widely. And even there, I would just like to point out that everybody has to innovate, the artisans especially, but even niche. We do not have a well-developed cold chain here in this part of the world. So if you are an artisanal maker, if you're an industrial chocolate maker, you have got to innovate around your distribution. And some of the sales, direct sales, how do you even order these chocolates or find them? A lot of innovation has come around that aspect of it for companies large and small. To point out that we have people who work beyond chocolate bars. Medunu is an absolutely fabulous brand. Selassie Atarika is the woman behind Medunu. She is a world-renowned chef, and the Medunu chocolate part of her brand really is Africa-inspired flavors. Like, to take a bite of one of her bonbons here is like a journey through African cuisines, every one of them different. Stunning, stunning, stunning work around flavor, Africa inspired. How can chocolate be a vehicle for tasting Africa ingredients and culinary inspirations. So Meduno, a stunning set of innovations coming from Chef Selassie. We also have product innovations that are nothing like any of those things. 𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗃 cocoa, that means almost like King Cocoa. The chief behind this company, Nana Aduna, has really taken 𝗪𝗶𝗀 as his starting point in many ways. 𝗪𝗶𝗀 may be familiar to many people in consumer markets around the world now, but they weren't familiar here. And so 𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗃, I think, began with this, took that as a starting point and said, okay, we're going to offer 𝗪𝗶𝗀 to people as a culinary thing, as a food, as something you might cook with or bake with or whatever, and began to make this 𝗪𝗶𝗀𝗏. And I have carried that 𝗪𝗶𝗀𝗏 around the world with me and shared it out with everyone because it's so delicious. But they make 𝗪𝗏 booster mix, they make energy bites flavored with dates. Now they make candles, they make potpourri, they just anything, soaps, anything you can imagine starting from cocoa. I believe they also have chocolate bar now, but really taking, what can we do with this bean that's not chocolate, that's not confectionery, and create an awareness in Ghana for, consuming chocolate in ways that would be completely innovative in our, culinary landscape here. So their market, when we have our craft markets on the weekends, the 𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗃 stall is always very crowded. We also have a cocoa juice company, 𝗀𝗂𝗃, and we may know cocoa juices from different parts of the world, particularly, Central or South America, but we also have this in Ghana. I don't know how wide their distribution is, but it exists. And we have Volta Winery, which makes country cocoa wine. I actually have a bottle of that in my fridge. And so people really innovating fantastically around different ways to add value. Through the Cocoapreneurship Institute of Ghana, we tend to work with these folks, with this group, the value addition people who are mainly based in Accra, though not exclusively, who are doing this kind of value addition. And so we have, through CIG, done our best to innovate to help them. We do other kinds of work, but we mainly end up working with these artisans. So here is an example. When I said we have a new one every day, we really do. That's Mutia, my co-founder of CIG, 𝗪𝗏𝗀𝗃, and myself with a new, with 𝗪𝗏𝗶𝗀, a new chocolate maker. Her brand is called 𝗪𝗲𝗀 Gold. So you may be seeing her stuff. We try to meet always with the new makers to understand their products, to understand what their business needs are. In partnership with a company called Mint, we have exhibitions where we dedicate space to these chocolate makers. This is the 𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗃 stand. You can see lots of cool different products. This is Cocoa Line, another artisan chocolate company local to Accra. And these exhibitions run regularly, or they did pre-COVID anyway, and they will return, to give these artisans and even mid-sized companies a space to share their products. Like I said, distribution's really, really hard. So how do you create consumer awareness when you can't put your product in front of people in a regular kind of way, where people will be seeing it every time they shop? So, the exhibitions really help them to, I think, I hope, promote the products, promote the culture of chocolate consumption here. And then we also run for the professionals, for the artisans, and anyone really who's adding value, CIG Resources Forum, which is dedicated professional series where when we have a Resources Forum event, it is specifically in response to a need that these value adding companies have expressed to us. So this was the most recent event we did. You can see it was decorated for the holidays. It was just a couple months ago with FDA Ghana, the Food and Drug Administration of Ghana. And so the process of getting your products approved in Ghana is, was expressed to us as a challenge. And so for these companies, so we said, okay, we're going to bring FDA in and we're going to meet with them face to face, and we're going to help you to have a dialogue with them. So you can see the FDA representatives here. There's Mutia, there's Leissle, who will be talking to us in a moment. And these are many, many, many of the artisans that are around in Accra and beyond, who came to FDA, our FDA Resources Forum. And of course, almost exactly 1 year ago, we did, right before COVID lockdown stuff, 𝗪𝗏𝗀𝗶𝘀𝗁 came here and we had a resources forum with them. Now, subsequently, CIG has become the brand ambassador in West Africa for CocoaTown. And we are so excited about this relationship because there are no West Africa machinery makers for chocolate. So every single machine that is used to make chocolate for the artisans and everyone else in West Africa has to be imported. And as you can imagine, for a small business, that is really, really tough, right? And so we were so fortunate to have 𝗪𝗏𝗀𝗶𝘀𝗁 come here and be face to face, not only with our own local artisans, but this front row here is folks from Sierra Leone who traveled specifically for this event, right? And so really the impact, I cannot express enough how important it is, for the support for certain innovations. If you don't even know how you can get your tabletop machine to start your company, how will you ever innovate as an entrepreneur, as a small business owner? So having the support of CocoaTown is really fantastic. And as you can see in this photo, there's the machines here. They brought everything so everyone could see, ask lots of questions. I think that's the grinder over there, maybe being demoed, or someone asking a question about it. Fantastic, fantastic event. And I'm looking at this photo and I can tell you that it's not just the artisan chocolate makers. Like I said, it's folks from Sierra Leone who came. It is importers or people who source beans for different reasons. It's a coffee roasting company is represented here. Lots and lots of different people are enthusiastic to learn more about what CocoaTown has to offer. So primarily we do support the value add folks, and we will continue in that vein at CIG. But I just want to point out that it remains really important to not just innovate, but just continue with the kind of development support that we can give throughout the cocoa growing community. So this is, we're very committed to making sure that the cocoa farming areas don't get neglected in our scope of activity. So we work very closely with 𝗪𝗏𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗃 cooperative, who are fair trade and organic certified. They have direct trade contracts with TAZA, with Uncommon Cacao, with Tony's Chocolonely. So CIG last year was able to, very much at Mutia's initiative, create a dig a borehole and provide clean, fresh water. It's located right near the 𝗪𝗏𝗀𝗀𝗀 offices. It's next to a school here in the background, and also, actually the school's over here, and also next to a church, so very central in the community. And you can just see beautiful, clean, fresh water now available to everyone in this community. And I'll just finish with CIG portion just to talk a little bit about another innovation that we found to be really exciting is our partnership with Ashesi University, which is a liberal arts university a little bit north of Accra, for the Ashesi Cocoa Hackathon. So you can see Mutia here, and Mutia studied at Ashesi. She got her degree from there, and she's a businesswoman, an entrepreneur with 25 years experience or more in running businesses here in Ghana. And when she went through Ashesi, realized that even though they have a very good entrepreneurship studies program, there was no focus on cocoa, right? So our premier institution for entrepreneurial studies, or one of them, University of Ghana Legon also has a business studies program. There was not a focus on cocoa. And so we thought, let's partner with Ashesi for, to inspire students to do some work in cocoa once they graduate and start turning their talents to starting businesses and so forth. So we spent a day at the workshop last year at the hackathon doing, talking to the students about the cocoa industry, spaces to innovate in the cocoa industry. Della from 𝗪𝗏𝗀𝗁 Cocoa came with us. Jean from 𝗪𝗏𝗀𝗁 Treats also came with us. You can see some 𝗪𝗏𝗀 chocolates right here. And really the goal was to inspire students, our youth, our young people here in West Africa, to innovate and to apply their talents to cocoa and chocolate. So I'm going to breeze through a few supply chain things, and then I'll ask Leissle to join us in just a few moments. But I wanted to show you very quickly what it looks like in the supply chain and where things have been innovated and where they haven't. So this is what harvest basically looks like. Obviously, that's me. I'm just showing you I'm one of the 2 cocoa trees that I know of that grows in Accra. But this is a pretty manual process, right? And I know there's innovations around mechanical harvesting and things like that. But this isn't, this is the basic tool that farmers would use if they can't reach the pods to grab them off the higher branches. And so really we're working with like pretty straightforward stuff as far as harvest is concerned. The innovations around farm labor and harvest, planting, weeding, harvesting, spraying, things like this, have not been really very much on the tool side of things. One of the most exciting innovations that I know of is 𝗪𝗏𝗀 Farms, which is run by a very talented man, Kwabena Asan-Mens, and started in central region of Ghana. 𝗪𝗏𝗀 Farms is basically a business that offers sharecropping arrangements. It is extremely common to enter into an arrangement for a farm owner who can't or doesn't want to, or for whatever reason is unable to do the farm work themselves, but enter into an arrangement with an individual person to do that work for them and then share the proceeds. Now, it's not always easy individually to make these kind of contracts, individual to individual. One person's always going to have more power than the other. It can really vary. Who gets to, the better terms from these arrangements? This is all very complicated. If you're unable to enter into one of these relationships in a way that is feeling good to you, then 𝗪𝗏𝗀 Farms is a tremendous innovation, because this is a company that comes in, right? A company, not a person. And 𝗪𝗏𝗀 Farms does the labor for you. And then, like any other sharecropping arrangement, at the end of the season, sells the cocoa and you share the proceeds. So that is a very cool innovation on the labor side, and just shows you the entrepreneurial thinking that's happening around cocoa here. So now another cool topic, fermentation. And so just to set things up for Leissle, this is what it would look like typically in West Africa, right? You get a big pile of pods and they're in a heap, and then you have to crack them open. My method is very laborious. Obviously, I use like my butcher knife. That's not very good. Normally what a farmer would use is a cutlass. And before I turn to Leissle, I just want to point out the one innovation I do know of for breaking and scooping the seeds out of the beans, which is the 𝗪𝗏𝗀𝗀. And 𝗪𝗏𝗀𝗀𝗀 is the person who introduced me to this tool. He was here marketing it in Ghana a few years ago, and it's not been widely adopted, and I really don't know why, because it's a genius tool. You can see here it's a flat blade, but it can crack open a pod quite easily. But it's curved, right? It's flat, but it's got a curve around it, which makes it easier to scoop out the beans. And then this part here, this little groove here, or cutout rather, is what farmers can use to strip the beans off the placenta. So, I mean, this is kind of where we've been at as far as innovations when it comes to post-harvest. This is, the only innovative tool I know of in West Africa to crack in pods. And then when you move from there to fermentation, we've yet to see some innovations really happening. This is basically what we all know, centralized fermentation in a central fermentary. These photos are from Ecuador. Thank you to Bill Fredericks, Chocolate Man, for sharing these photos with me. As we know in other contexts, beans are fermented in large boxes in a central location. This is still from Ecuador. This is Dominican Republic. And, here it happens in what we call Heap. Individual farmers on their own farms ferment their beans by themselves. And so it happens in buckets and stuff in other parts of West Africa, but in Ghana, it's Heap, right? Which is just what it sounds like, a heap of beans covered with plantain leaves, left there for a few days to ferment. Then they're generally turned and the placenta is removed and then covered again for another few days. Now, heap fermentation works really, really well for Ghana. Farmers have a high level of knowledge, even if they don't universally apply it. They know what the best practices are, and enough people do it well enough to have made Ghana the flavor of chocolate worldwide, right? And that is thanks to the heap fermentation that farmers have been doing for 150 years here. And so, Heap works really well, and it serves the bulk market exactly for, what the bulk market needs. Heap does not tell us anything about different flavor profiles, about what can be achieved through different types of fermentation. And that is a tremendous space for innovation left to come. So I'm going to now turn things over to Leissle Agyare of Three Mountains Cocoa to tell us more about that. And so, Leissle, his experience, his heritage is here in Ghana, and he'll talk to you more about that. But his experience for a long time was as senior manager in food and beverages industry, and so came to Three Mountains already with this experience and knowledge about what makes good food, and is now applying that to his really incredibly innovative vision around organic cocoa, high quality product that can sustain communities in a holistic way. And so Leissle's been doing we're part of a fermentation working group together, but Leissle really runs those experiments himself. So I'm going to introduce Leissle, and he can take it away. And Leissle, would you like to start out by telling us a little bit more about yourself and about what the vision for Three Mountains is?
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're in the world. It's a privilege to be here. So I'm Leissle Agyare. We sort of grow organic cocoa in our own sort of family heritage land in Ashanti-Akim region towards the eastern region of Ghana. It's a very mountainous area where it's backed onto a forest reserve. We have created a cooperative with around 7 different farming sort of communities in terms of villages, hamlet, and around 2,000 farmers, 30% of that being women, and really spanning around 11,000 hectares. Now, our real vision is to have an organic village as such, because the way in which that area is roadmap is that it's just one lane which goes into this, backs into this huge forest reserve in Ashanti-Akim region, and to be able to grow sustainable cocoa, which benefits all our stakeholders in terms of our farmers, our cooperative, our people, and really change the infrastructure of that environment for them.
And Leissle, what inspired you to so when I first visited the farmland with you, that was last July, I think, it was so gorgeous, right? And it was unlike any cocoa farmland I've ever seen in Ghana. And as we were, exploring the area with you, I felt like you had a lot of ideas around how to use this natural resource, this beauty, you had ideas around protecting wildlife, you had ideas around this holistic, organic kind of vision, you had ideas around ecotourism, alternative livelihood options, just so many things that I know you will do eventually. But what motivated you to really focus on fermentation in these early stages of Three Mountains?
Well, look, I'm quite lucky that we have various number of cocoa farm in different areas of Ghana, historic. Now, this area was special because of the way in which just the beauty of that landscape. But really, seeing the villages and seeing the people of the village and what we can do to change their lives, there were so many farmers with huge amounts of experience of actually harvesting and growing and planting cocoa. And anybody would know, to plant cocoa on mountains and hills, it takes a lot of expertise to do that. But also the flavor that comes out of those beans are amazing. And walking around tasting the different beans, I saw the like different flavor that was coming from depending on what farmer you go to or what hamlet you're standing in. So my focus was that the flavor, the end product, was absolutely key, because this is where we can drive premium and actually take away from that experience of people seeing West African cocoa as just blended beans, and where we can really help the farmers a lot more with their skill set, which they're lacking, because they don't consume cocoa beans. It's not a crop that they grow to actually eat. They dry this thing and then send it off to the Western world to create chocolate as such. But I saw that in noticing that skill set, that gap was there, and the importance of us improving that motivates me to write. If we can really get these amazing farmers with history of farming for over 60 years plus, some of them, to really ferment from actually the moment you cut that pod to fermentation, to dry, and to really get that training to be quite tight, we can really have a super product on our hands. So the weakness and change became our focus, and advocating and rewarding them becoming my motivation to actually change that for the farmers.
What level of, like, how satisfied were you? Because I know you spend a lot of time on the farm. Like, we see you in Accra from time to time, but you're mostly really up in Kwehu in the farmland area, spending a tremendous amount of time in the hamlets, like you said, working with farmers. Like, how satisfied were you with the level of fermentation practices that you were seeing before, we started this experimentation? Or was it varied? Like, did you have different kinds of experiences?
Kristy, you just cut out a little bit, so I completely missed that, the bulk of the question.
Oh, shame. Sorry, am I back now?
Yeah, you are.
Okay, great. I was saying that we see you in Accra from time to time, but mostly I know you spend time up in the hamlets, like you said. You spend a lot of your time on the farms with the farmers, observing, working alongside them. How satisfied were you with the best practices around fermentation, in your experience over the last year?
So in terms of fermentation, so the farmers are used to sort of, they'll harvest the cocoa, leave it a couple of days, then come back and crack the cocoa. Now, that could be dependent on the number of help that they'll have to come and crack the cocoa, depending on the size of their farm, how good the harvest is. But also, it's that cocoa should be when you harvest cocoa, you should crack the pods within 2 days, but also it should be ripe, not underripe, and you should have, we'll see later on, you shouldn't have a mixture of rotten pods mixed in there. So what tends to happen is they'll crack the cocoa, they'll ferment it, but the turning over of every 2 days is something that's a struggle for them. And the sheer help to deliver that product becomes difficult for them, because their main focus is crack this cocoa, ferment it, dry it, and get it to the PC to buy the cocoa. The pressure on them, it's not on the finished product. So what I saw was that though they were absolutely like amazing farmers, like exceptional, and really learning the skill set to actually have to grow it from seedling to actually a plant on there. The end that really matters for us chocolate and for bean-to-bar makers and chocolate makers, it's not their focus. Now, if I compare that to food that they consume and eat, it's absolutely important to have an amazing finished product, because that's what they're going to eat. So training them, allowing them to actually taste chocolate as it is on there, and which, lucky enough to have had the opportunity to do that, for them to have the lean seasoned beans, for them to taste it and see what the end product of our farm is like, is great. And also the ability for us to let the farmers use our farm and our beans to experiment was hugely important, because for them, it's their livelihood. And for us, we're trying to create something beyond today and really to the future.
Let me just ask about that because I wasn't with you. So what we did as part of our fermentation working group, for our audience was Leissle had provided some beans from last year's light crop, which one of our working group members, made into chocolate. And then we sent some of those chocolate bars back to the village and to the hamlets. And I think the chief was able to taste some. And as you say, people invest a lot in, subsistence crops, that they're going to eat. They make sure they're high quality. People are really attentive to the foods that they consume here in Ghana, across West Africa. But as cocoa, as you say, people don't consume it. So what were people's reactions when you brought those chocolate bars back to the hamlets on your farmland? What did they say? It was like their experience of tasting their own beans. Okay, they have tasted chocolate. Everyone knows chocolate here. It's not like people live on the moon, right? They know chocolate, but this was their own beans, right? So what was the response?
You slightly cut out for a second, but it was actually amazing to see their look on their faces to actually taste a product which comes from actually their farm, and they've seen it being harvested and dry, and to actually see the flavor notes to taste different flavors for them, because the farmers do not ever get a chance to taste chocolate bar made directly from the beans that they've actually harvested and farmed. And so it was great for me to see it, but just amazing to see the look on their faces, which was just super incredible. So, and thank you for that, because there's an opportunity that happened so quickly. And with lean season beans as well, the flavor is slightly different. So the beans are not as the beans are slightly smaller, but there's different flavors from the lean season beans. And actually some people prefer the lean season bean to the main season beans in terms of a crop. Now, the challenges that we had in terms of trying to get them to ferment was box fermentation to heap fermentation. There's a huge difference for them, because though the farmers are used to heap fermentation, box fermentation is something that farmers do not do. And the cost implication of, though there's huge amounts of wood around, is to get the actual carpenter and the craftsmanship to actually create these boxes is always a bit of a challenge in there. And we wanted to make it more interesting to do box and heat fermentation with local fruits in the area to see what flavor enhancement that we can create from that. So that was new for them, and actually using our own beans and our own farm and investing in them was great to do, and finding somebody to actually be the person to go through the experiment and really seeing where the skill set of our farmers was a huge importance for us.
Were people mystified by the idea of fermenting in a box, or did they take to it pretty enthusiastically? What was the kind of experience of that? Saying we're going to throw these beans in a box rather than a heap?
If you to some of the farmers, even the chief was like, I am just mad, because they're looking at, if they've carried on fermenting on the ground for how many years, suddenly you got this guy coming and asking you to do in a box, buy me a carpenter, this is what we're going to design, this design of the box are there. And in addition to that, I'm asking them to then try mixing fruit with the fermentation as well. It's like, am I crazy? And absolutely not. But there was a method to my madness in there for them to actually see. And it took a bit of time. It took quite a lot of time for them to convince them. One thing was, we're using our own beans, our own pods from our own farm. Great. But the other thing is that the farmers are used to cracking the pods on the actual farm and fermenting it there. And the walk from, let's say, where they actually live in the village to actually the farm, it's around a 20, 30 minutes walk to get there. And so I'm asking them to crack the pods on the farm and carry this back closer to where they live, because we wanted them to ferment it closer to sheds, to their house, and then we could keep the temperature and turn around every 2 days. And asking them to take probes, to take temperatures, was like, is this a science experiment for me, or is this a joke? Because for them, it's dry this beans and get the beans out of there. Now, if in our farm, there are sort of no roads as such, you're walking through cocoa farms to our farm, and there are streams and little river pads that walk through before you get there. So we're lucky we've got some donkeys that can help with the weight in terms of carrying items through. So to get them to do this was like, great, okay, they'll ferment it every 2 days to turn it over. But the smell when you're fermenting closer to their home is something like, what, and the liquid that comes from as it fermenting is like, what is going on? But convincing somebody who was one of the farmers who's well respected and has years of actually farming the cocoa, it means that the message that goes to the farmers is that we're actually trying to create something which will benefit them in later stage. And actually our vision is to have a central fermentation to help actually improve the quality of the finished product from that area on there.
And you know, from there, as we've discussed, like there's so many possibilities that we just don't know from Heap what different flavors are like, what different varieties, could give in Ghana, because we do have lots of different varieties of cocoa. People don't usually think of that, but we do. Different elevations, like different everything, right? And I know our working group has kind of had a lot of these ideas in mind, and we'll act on them eventually. But you just said something that is very interesting to me, which is that it took like someone respected already in the community, a farmer, to adopt or to get on board, and to kind of show that this isn't just a crazy experiment, that it's something that could potentially be valuable. What other kinds of supports do you think you would need to make this a success? Like, what else needs to happen besides that buy-in?
Kristy, suddenly you just cut off for like most of that.
Has it been cutting off this whole time, Leissle? Did I just give like a 40-minute talk and no one could hear me? Hopefully not.
Repeat the question again.
Here, Kristy, I think something, maybe the connection for carelessly. We don't have any problem hearing you.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll try again, Leissle. What other supports do you need besides that farmer buy-in, right? That prominent community member saying, yes, I'll do this box thing. What else do you need to make this a success?
So it's good because you have a lot of extension officers in Ghana who work with the cocoa farmers. And the beauty about being in Ghana for that period of time was to build real relationships on the ground level, build relationships with the villagers in themselves, and really set out a vision of what we're trying to deliver and create. Right. And our vision includes building a training, which will start this year, is building a training institute on the actual farm. So they can go in and actually see all the best practices on our farm. And that will be free, and that's our investment to them. But also is the buy-in from the extension, the buy-in from Cocoa Board, the buy-in from the villages, the improvement that we're looking to deliver there. It means that they start to listen. And I spent a countless amount of time seeing different chiefs in different hamlets and actually creating this group together, because originally it was just our farm, which was 40 hectares on our own. But through relationship building and that buy-in is what's created this village and hamlets wanting to join us to actually deliver this one goal. So it takes, if you look at chocolate, you say it's a relationship business. This is very much about building relationships with the villagers on there. And actual, my spending of so much time in the villages helped enormously, because had I been an absent sort of just one day in and then off again, absolutely not. It would not have helped at all. And it's great. So that's one challenge which we've gotten over. And then now it's about that consistency of seeing them and being there and working with them throughout that whole period to deliver this over the next few months, and then get into that transitional period of organic beans in 2.5 years' time now. And us taking a point, which was that we took 25,000 seedlings this year to plant, this is 20,000 cocoa, and then add on to that 25,000 shade trees for the farmers, and to spend the money to actually bring farmers work on our land, that shows the level of interest that we want to actually grow cocoa in there. And so that was super important for them to see that we're not investing just for today, but we actually want to get involved from actually the root level all the way through. And looking at problems that they've got with garden, when it rains in Ghana, you can barely get to the farm, but we don't want to actually destroy the natural habitats of there. So bringing in donkeys, showing them other ways in which they can actually farm and farm a lot better in there. Look at how we can improve the ecosystem around there for them, because it's an amazing area. That is. I mean, I'm sure your walk that you did for over 4 hours or so wasn't easy. So yeah.
It wasn't easy, but it was totally worth it because it's so beautiful. And you know what I'm struck by in your comments is that, you know, it's one thing to say, okay, we want to do a fermentation experiment, you know, but none of these things, and I think this is true for every innovation I've talked about in this talk, is that none of them happen in isolation, right? Like you can't just swoop in and say, okay, we're gonna do box now, like, you know, and that's it. Like actually, when you want to innovate in West Africa, and maybe this is true for anywhere in the world, it's like one piece of this larger puzzle, and you have to work on so many fronts to get, you know, the one kind of innovation to take hold. And it sounds like you've been really just invested in so many of these different aspects.
Kristy, it might be my connection, and I'm like, this is crazy because you keep cutting out. But if I'm just guessing the gist of that, you're talking about what was that last question? Because it keeps cutting out on my part.
Sorry, Leissle, that you can't do any innovation in isolation. You've got to invest throughout the community, throughout the supply chain.
Absolutely. I mean, to just try to think that we'll do it on our own and just our farm would definitely not work. And actually bringing more people involved means that we're able to deliver a lot more and actually work a lot quicker within that area to create something that is long lasting and to change the lives of the generations that are under. Because one thing in those villages that most of the farmers are, you know, quite old and really in their late ages, but the younger sort of farmers that are there, to see someone of my age there and trying to farm, asks a lot of questions for them as to what more can they do to improve their lives to what they currently have on there. Mm-hmm. And for instance, when you look at the drying mats that's used, it's used all the time there, but then to find somebody to make the drying mats takes you a couple of weeks to get somebody to actually make adequate drying mats. Because one thing that we have is there are sort of goats that run around, which they cause quite a lot of problem in there, but actually the goats actually consume, they eat the drying beans. When some seep through, you see the goats jump onto the drying mats and, you know, they're chomping away, which could be a new taste of goats with chocolate flavor in them. That would be interesting. But it's that to have drying mats, which when the guys are drying, is that when it rains or pours down and rains, that they're not having to then cover again with plastic and the fermentation then starts again. It's really designing something that they can, it's quite easy for them to just cover the drying mats when it rains and to cover it from pests coming across, because we want to dry in that natural sun. So keeping all the traditional elements that they do, but just improving on that, it's something that we're trying to do. And you have to spend time in all the different hamlets to see all the different best farmers, the large farmers, the people that have got, you know, huge amount of help, people that haven't got any help at all, but they're trying their best to deliver some portion of this sort of chocolate cocoa world for their family.
I think we are so fortunate to have you, Leissle, because I don't know anyone else making this kind of investment, right? You didn't hear that, did you?
I did.
Oh, okay.
It is like a pleasure to be around. And if you look, this is a lady in one of the hamlets that close to us, and this is beans that have been fermented. It's still drying. And here's a great picture, which is that the mats she's got a second mat just there. But actually, if she spread it out a lot more, the beans will dry a lot on there, and what's under will not be fermenting. And then what they leave is that they've left that there, should in case it starts to rain, covered again, plastic over. And they use bamboo as the stand, but we want to try to improve that, because having the right skill set means that we can design a better fermentation station for them to use going forward. And the villages can work together. And you would know this firsthand, to get 5 different chiefs to be communicating and talking as one, as a whole different village, it takes a lot of work to get them across that bridge on there. And that's something which is not easy to do. And I've managed to, for some reason or another, get them on board with what we're trying to deliver here.
Well, I think it's been your incredible investment of time and energy and like care. Like it's so clear your passion for this and how much you care about it, and like your ties to these communities. I'm just conscious of time, so I'm gonna flip through a few more slides, and then I'm gonna just wrap up beyond the supply chain, and then I think we can take questions, because I know people are gonna have lots of questions for you. So I'll just do your final few slides, if that's fine.
Yeah. So this is one bean. Yeah. So we've got to the final, the last 2.
This is unusual in Ghana, though, I will say. You don't usually see these large dry mats. You see this more like in Ivory Coast. So that's already a kind of different thing than you usually see.
And these are pods which they're packed in there, and there's some bad pods within them, which you can see, which are overripe, and some few black pods in there. Now, if you go down to the next picture on there, now you can see on here, this is when things can sometimes go wrong without our own intervention in there, is that we have sort of black pods mixed in there, we have overripe beans, we have underripe beans all mixed together. Now, these are small, like 1 acre farmers that are trying everything possible to have some harvest to feed their family on there. Now, our intervention will be to improve this, help them to be able to harvest at the right time, not add beans of this nature into it at all, and really educate them more to be better. Because the larger farmers with huge farms, you would never see this or have this at all. But this is a great picture for us in terms of training and allowing them to understand what happens if this is added into chocolate, which goes forward for their flavors on there.
And I feel like one of the great things that was going to come out of, your fermentation work specifically, Three Mountains will have many, many achievements, but the fermentation work specifically almost seems to me like it will have 2 outcomes. Like, one, improve practices. So this farmer, I'm sure, has the knowledge not to put those black seeds in there, but has done it anyway. So how do you improve practice? But also then how do you do the kind of experimental, innovative stuff that, will show us what are the different flavor profiles, what are the different opportunities that we have here with Ghana beans?
And it's for me, improving the fermentation techniques will just take that flavor and the flavor of the beans to a different level, because when it's done well, amazing flavor comes after these areas. It's super incredible. You taste some of the beans, and I like tasting beans whilst they're drying, because the taste that comes from that heat, incredible. It's just the best on there.
It's great. Yeah. It's amazing to hear, like, just even see you talking about this. It's so inspiring. Any final thoughts, Leissle, before I wrap it up and we start to take our questions? And I know you're going to stay with us, obviously. So, but any final words before we turn to that?
No. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to work with you in the last 12 months in there. And it's just amazing what is to come going forward. So by a year this time, maybe people can taste some amazing beans, which will be transitional beans, to see what the flavors and what work that we've done by then. So thank you.
Absolutely, 100%. A year from now, we'll have some nice stuff, right, to show people. And as always, Leissle, an absolute pleasure. It is a delight always to talk with you, and just thank you for taking the time. And like I said, Leissle will stick around so we can have questions for him too. But really, really fantastic as always. I'm just I just need two more minutes just to bring our supply chain to a close. It's just like less, and Leslie's already touched upon this. I just want to just show people some images of like what happens after we ferment, from drying mat to port. As Leslie's already mentioned, lots of innovations that we can still do around the drying, which would tend to be in the hands of the individual farmer, but perhaps we can do something more like what we see in Central America or other parts of Africa even, where it's more centralized. Again, pictures from the Dominican Republic. We don't have anything like this here in Ghana, but perhaps these are ideas and innovations that we can draw upon. Transport, another issue, is extremely manual labor along the supply chain. Everything is done by manual laborers when it comes to transporting beans. This is how cocoa sacks are loaded and unloaded onto trucks. The trucks then drive across roads much like this, so we've got lots of work left to be done around just making the evacuation of cocoa beans an easier process for everyone involved. There's warehousing, always a consideration. These pictures are actually from a warehouse in Amsterdam, but I just wanted to point out, just the incredible volume of space that you need to store cocoa and to store it properly and to move it around when it comes time to get it in or out of a country. So lots of space left there. This is a heap of beans in Amsterdam from West Africa. They weren't Ghana beans. I'm pretty sure they were from Ivory Coast, but we can see clearly here is some work left to be done on cleaning up the beans. So always room for improvement and innovation there. And then finally, the export itself, everything is going to sail away on a big ship. How can we continue to innovate around keeping that cocoa here in West Africa and working not just with the cocoa itself adding value, but beyond the supply chain? And I'll just conclude with these final thoughts, which is that we've talked mainly about the actual supply chain and value chain itself, but there's so much beyond that, including the information technologies that support our knowledge of what happens along a supply chain, with increasing calls for transparency and just more knowledge about what happens at cocoa sources. Companies have responded to that, including Farmerline, which is a Ghana-based company that uses their proprietary platform 𝗪𝗏data to offer information about farmers, about farms, about where the cocoa is coming from, and to provide that kind of transparency that consumers increasingly desire. And then we have literally everything else, right? We have how do you, more efficiently and effectively handle cocoa waste? How do we improve farmer literacy and farmer health? What do we do about gender division of labor, land tenure, market access? I mean, this is stuff we haven't even touched on today, but like innovations, abound in these areas. They're happening now, and many more yet to be seen. So again, I'll flip back to another slide, some other slides to illustrate as we take Q&A, but lots more about this always available on dockofchalk.com, on the CIG website, cocoapreneurship.org, and please do keep in touch on social media or any other way, and we will always be happy to continue this conversation in dialogue with all of you. And I know that we've already begun dialoguing with many of you who are on this webinar over the past few years, and we look forward to continuing those conversations. So I'll just flip back to some nice slides where people can see some beautiful image. And we're very happy to take questions, both Lesley and myself. So Andal, I know you've been keeping an eye on the chat, which I haven't been, but I'm very happy to have a look and take any questions.